Hi, everyone. This is Raquel Nedden. I just wanted to welcome you to week 2 of performance and assessment in the virtual classroom. So we'll wait till our viewers come on. So we'll wait a few minutes before we start the live session until our viewer count starts appearing. Just some housekeeping things. Sometimes there's a little bit of delay when we have these live streaming sessions. So it could take up to, I've seen it take up to 20 seconds for me to start saying something and then for it to appear on the live streaming. So if that's the case, we'll just try to be very patient and we'll work through the session. If you would like to type in a question, I'd like you to go to the Google page for performance and assessment in the virtual classroom, and that was actually the first link in your announcement. And you'll see a little text box right below the, I guess you want to call it a video box where you can start the broadcast. And so what you can do is you can just type your question right in there. You can hit share, and then the group will see it and I'll be able to respond to it as we go through the session. And I'll try to watch those as time goes on to make sure I catch all the questions. Another thing you can do is you can also be a part of the conversation and join the Google Hangout. There's like a group chat. So on the bottom left-hand corner of the video, on the YouTube streaming page, there's a little, I don't know, like a little quotation mark symbol, and it says be a part of the conversation, and click here to join the audience for that Hangout. So if you click on that, you'll be able to be kind of in the session, I guess is what you call it, and I'll be able to see the question and answers through there if you chat in. So I'll try to watch the chat and I'll try to watch the actual Google page where the Hangout was scheduled. And between both, I'm hoping that I can answer all the questions. So I'll apologize in advance if I miss one. Let's go ahead and start talking about what's going on in the class first. Let's spend the first 5 minutes talking about week 2. So for week 2, we're talking about the importance of seat time versus assessment in the virtual world and how everything's changing. So when we think of mastery-based learning, a lot of times we may think of an independent study program. We may think of a room where students are doing lots of packets and they're just doing output. They're focused on output. Things have really changed, but not so much. It's kind of changed the same, but stayed the same, if you want to think about it that way. We've transferred to the virtual world. A lot of independent study takes place through virtual learning. However, it's still output based. So, you know, a student could spend 8 hours on a module, or they could spend 3 hours on a module. If they pass their test, they're considered to have mastery of the course, and then it's good. The problem is that the school districts kind of have a challenge with this because of ADA. Now, virtual learning is very popular during summer school when we don't have to worry about daily attendance, and the funding model is different. But during the school year, it does become an issue in terms of average daily attendance, and some schools go for an independent study model, and others go for kind of a blended learning type where the student is in the seat doing the work in a lab, a computer lab environment. So it just depends. So this week we'll be talking about all those issues. So for this week, I want you to view the video lectures for the unit. You're going to read the recommended resources, although those are not required. And then if you find any resources of your own or have any good articles to share, be sure to start a new thread in the forums so that we can all look at that. You're going to do the discussion forum for this week regarding seat time and virtual learning, and one quiz. So, and you get 3 attempts on the quiz, so it's not too bad. You can always try to get 100%. And we'll talk about the peer assignment next. Okay, so the peer assignment is going to open up next Monday, June 1st at 8 o'clock. So you won't find a go to the assignment button until that button goes live on June 1st. And I just saw an error as well in the syllabus, so I'll get that corrected. It does say May 18th still. Okay, so June 1st, the go to assignment button will be live. Okay, once you see the assignment, you're going to have to do a couple things. I will give you the rubric for which you will be evaluated on in the next announcement, so that way you'll have it. There's going to be 8 numerical items, quantitative items that you'll have to answer, and there'll be 2 qualitative items that you'll have to answer, so essay type questions. So a total of 10 questions, so it's not too bad at all. And the first 8 are straight calculations. If you look at the math review video from week 1, you'll see tips on how to calculate items in the gradebook, and I promise to make it painless for you. I set up the gradebook very nice. So what you're actually going to see is you're going to see a sample gradebook, and you'll be asked to calculate the percent of points assigned to each category. And let's see. You have a point total, and then it'll give the totals for each category. You just calculate it based on that category. There'll be drop-down answers for those. So even if you haven't done math in a while or need to brush up on those, you'll be able to figure out the answers from the drop-down menu. Then you're going to have 2 qualitative assignments to do, so 2 essay type questions. You're going to look at potential problems in the gradebook, figure out what might be wrong with the course. And I saw some remarks in the forum about, well, is this a typical scenario? The answer is yes. Many prepackaged courses that districts purchase from course providers or schools purchase from course providers come with these pre-calculated, prepackaged grade books as well. So what happens is all the assignments will be already pre-populated and listed for the entire semester. And they'll all have points assigned, and they'll all have percent values, weights, and you may just get that course and you say, oh great, what do I do now? I've got all these assignments populated and I don't like the way they broke down the percents. I don't know what's going on. So before you start teaching is the time to evaluate it and make sure that it's set up properly. So it's very important to learn how to evaluate a gradebook for what I call statistical soundness. That is the gradebook really a fair gradebook? Is that how you want to assess it? You have to be very careful with the tests and quizzes, midterms and finals, to make sure that they have the proper weighting assigned as well. It could really make or break a course. And one thing I like about virtual courses is that the entire semester is laid out already. So the teacher is not able to really make things up as they go along as far as points and weights and percents. They're not able to just randomly assign stuff like, oh, I'll make this 100 points and I'll make this 25. Well, why? Why are you doing that? Why would you assign this many points to this assignment and this many points to another assignment? So it really makes the teacher sit down and think about the entire semester, how they want it laid out, what percent they want assigned to each category, so that there's no surprises. And sometimes as teachers are teaching in the traditional classroom, they may say, well, I just assign things random points and then I weight everything. Well, that works to a certain extent if the weighting is correct, first of all. But you have to also look at weights within a weight, what I call it. So if you have a huge number of points within a certain weight percent, how is that going to affect the students as well? And creating a virtual course makes you really sit down and think about all these things and plan out the entire semester before it happens. Now, if you get a prepackaged course, however, it's not always up to the teacher. Sometimes it's here, this is what you're handed, and you have to work with it. So that's the time where you need to ask questions to your administration and see, well, can this course be changed? Can I change the weights and percents on this? Is this going to work? Look how all these items are teacher scored and all these items are computer scored. There's something wrong. If every single test in the entire course is computer graded multiple choice, then you have to really look and see if that's the kind of course you want. Where's your multiple measures of assessment? How are you going to show mastery in different ways? Okay, now people say all the time, well, you're teaching a MOOC and the MOOC has lots of multiple choice questions. Yes, MOOCs are different. MOOCs are different than 30 student classes at a traditional high school. Okay, so it's really not representative. And it's kind of ironic if I'm teaching the class on performance and assessment, but the MOOC is not set up that way. That's just kind of the nature of MOOCs. Okay, so in week 3 assignment, you're going to imagine you're a virtual teacher. You're going to receive a prepackaged course. The course is going to have all these assignments with assigned points already. You're going to calculate the percent of each category, and then you're going to answer 2 essay questions. Okay, so phase 1 takes place between all next week. So June 1st all the way till, I believe it's June 8th. Let me double check the dates on that. Let's see, actually June 7th. So Monday, June 1st to Sunday, June 7th is going to be phase 1. That phase is the phase which you submit your own assignment. The second phase starts right away the next morning, June 8th. So now we're in week 4, June 8th until June 16th. And we actually extended it out, I think 2 days. So that phase is a little longer. During the second phase, you will be grading 3 of your peers' assignments. Now, if you think about a MOOC has thousands of people potentially. And this is a very efficient way where we can do we can do assignments that are not just multiple choice. We can do assignments that have a little bit of interaction with your peers. They require more than a multiple choice response, and we're able to work it in. That way the instructor doesn't have 4,000 or 5,000 assignments to grade, but at the same time, we're able to get a little bit of interaction. Okay, so questions I always get asked. Okay, so what if I don't submit the assignment? The assignment's worth 15% of your grade. So technically you do need a 70% or better to pass the MOOC with a verified certificate if you're going for signature track. If you're not going for signature track and you're just taking the class for enrichment, then it's not a problem. If you're on signature track and want to receive a verified certificate, you have to pass with a 70% or better. So there's a little bit of leeway as far as the tests, the quizzes, and the peer assignment. The next question I always get asked is, well, what if I don't correct the other 3? So everyone will be assigned 3 peers. So you're going to correct 3 assignments. If you don't do that, then they deduct 20% of the grade. So it's really 20% of the 15% that you get. So it's not a significant amount in the course, but it's just a little bit of incentive to make sure that you grade 3 of your peers. Now, why do we pick 3? We pick 3 to allow for cases where students grade none at all. So if a student chooses to grade none, or they've signed up for the MOOC but don't complete the work, then at least we have some leeway and we inflate it a little bit. So if you correct 3, that'll make up for maybe 2 people that are not doing it. So it actually does work, believe it or not, and we're able to do it pretty well. Okay, the last question I usually get is, what if I don't like the way that my assignment was graded? So I feel that I did the assignment better than it was, and it wasn't graded properly. Okay, the first thing you have to do is keep in mind that that is only 15% of your grade. So even if you got a portion of that, you'll still be okay as far as signature track. So it's not a huge problem, okay? So just to let you know. All right. Oh, and the last question I get asked, can I resubmit it? Yes, you can resubmit the peer assignment within the week before the deadline. If it's after that, then no, it'll be locked out because then they get pushed out to the students for the peer review. Okay, so how do I review a student? So once June 8th comes around, you'll have access to 3 of your peers' assignments, and you'll get a rubric to grade your students for their essay questions. And for their numerical answers, they're just multiple choice. So you're just going to grade it. They either got it or they didn't. It's an all or nothing. You just grade their 8 questions, which are numerical answers. For the 2 questions, you'll grade on a rubric, and I'll give you guys that rubric in advance so you know both how you'll be scored and then how you'll be graded. Okay, and let me just pause for questions. Are there any questions on the peer assessment before we go on? Okay, so we have a question from Deborah. I remember choosing not to do a hand in. Yes. Okay. So this came up actually in the video lecture. So Deborah has a question about incentive in gradebooks. And there's an entire psychological component to gradebooks. And I hope that you'll agree with me on this because there really is. If an assignment or a category is worth such an insignificant amount, students can choose not to do it and still pass the course with an A. And this is a huge problem for gradebooks. And I think teachers kind of don't realize how it impacts them until they look back over the course of the semester and say, well, what went wrong? Why didn't any of the students do the discussion boards? Well, they were worth 5 points each and it only amounted to 2% of the grade. So the students figured out that it wasn't worth the effort to do that. So I'm a big fan of balance, and I'm a big fan of the 20%. You put 20% aside for everything. It gives the impression that everything is important, that one assignment is not more important than the other, that you need to do everything to pass the class. And you really don't want to start out with a maximum grade of 80% if you skip an entire category. So students tend to do something from every single category if it's balanced out that way. One phenomenon about virtual learning, good thing and bad thing, is that the whole semester is already laid out for you. So students, the bright students especially, can go through and scan and say, hey, if I don't take that test, it's only going to be 4% of my grade. I think I'm going to be okay. I'm having a bad week. I'm going to skip it. Good and bad. If they can figure that out, that's good, but it's not the result that you want. So it's very important to keep that balance all throughout the semester with your students. Right, 20 chemistry pre-labs, that's a lot to only be worth 5%. Another thing you have to keep in mind with online learning is you have to play around with the weights and percents to see what part you want that's done at home virtually, especially in a blended environment, and one part that's done in person. So for example, if you're a school that does blended learning and the students have to take their midterms and finals in person, you want to play around with the weights and percents to make sure that it's getting the result that you want and that it's representative. So if you know that a student is an A student and this midterm was terribly hard and it counted for 60% of the grade and they didn't do well, then you know something's off. You want to make sure that it's a fair weight in percent. Okay, so let's talk about a couple issues. And the first one that we were going to talk about tonight is integrity in the online classroom. So how do I know that it's that person on the other side of the computer? The shorter answer is that you don't, okay? And that's why we have to do these things in the virtual environment to make sure that we preserve the course integrity. More and more, the universities, the NCAA requirements, the university requirements are looking at online courses and want to make sure that those schools and those course developers have put in protections to make those online courses academically have academic integrity. Okay, so the first thing is to get to know your students. That seems basic, but in an online world, you have to reach out a little bit more. You have to do web conferences with the students, pick up the phone and greet them, especially if you have low class sizes. If you have higher class sizes, it gets a little bit harder. I used to pick up the phone and call my students the first week of the semester to get to know them, know that I'm involved in the course, know that I'm going to be keeping track of their work, I'm going to be grading things. Responding by email, instant messaging, and phone, and just having that teacher sense. I know when an email doesn't appear to be from a student, it looks like it's from a parent or an adult, and that's when I pick up the phone and I talk to the student. That's one way, is just to get to know your students. Once you get to know them, you'll have more interaction and engagement with them. You'll get to know their work samples. That way the chances of them trying to cheat on something will hopefully go down. The next thing you want to do is steer away from multiple choice questions. And in a MOOC, it's really not representative. So I'm saying, yes, steer away from multiple choice. However, in MOOCs, we don't set them up that way. You want to have lots of teacher graded items. You want to have multiple ways for them to show their knowledge. You want to be able to have them do presentations and essay questions, higher level reasoning. Your test questions should have a combination of fill in the blanks and multiple choice and drop downs and open-ended responses, so that you have enough representation and work samples from that student that you can say, yes, this student completed this and this is how I know. And it wasn't just a multiple choice test. Now, if you do have a suspicion that an item may not have been completed by the student, I have in the past, and you need to get your administration's permission on this, but I have in the past asked a student to come into a web conference and present their work. So for example, if they were doing math and they did a certain page and I had a suspicion that it was done by an adult or by a friend, I would say, you know what, that's great. I want you to explain how you did this to me. Why don't you meet me in the web conference during office hours this week and we can go over your practice. And usually you can get a feel right then of what's going on with the student if they did indeed do it or not. In some cases, if it's very severe and you suspect that there's an academic integrity problem, you can require, make sure you get your administration's approval, but you can require that the student come into the web conference and give the answers orally or even demonstrate their work. I've done that in the past for extreme cases, but it's very rare. Hopefully it would never get to that point, but that is a protection just in case. And it would have to be built into some kind of academic integrity plan. So if your district or school is writing an academic integrity plan, you can put all the what-if scenarios and reserve the right to have the student come in, present their work if there's a question on integrity. I use the web conferencing. I used to use it constantly when I was in the classroom, virtual classroom regularly. I would have the students do PowerPoint presentations, even debates, and they would have to demonstrate their knowledge for mathematical reasoning. I would have them come in and do that. We would set a time with them and each person would have a chance to present. And then I would make it a significant portion of their grade so that way the integrity was bumped up as well. And it would have to be the student because they were there on web conferencing with me and they were speaking and they were interacting with me. So that's another reason. Okay, as far as the LMS goes, LMSs are getting better at accounting for academic integrity, and I think more and more we're seeing the LMS systems respond to teacher requests. They're saying, hey, I have this problem in the virtual classroom. What can you do to help me? So the LMS systems, I always put an honor code in front of my quizzes and tests. So a certification statement saying, yes, this is my work and I'm neither giving help nor receiving help. They can certify to that. Can they just click it? Yes, of course they can. But it's just another layer that I can have in place that will help with academic integrity. Another thing is to have multiple versions of the test. I always used to do a test A, B, and C. I think 3 versions of the test is usually enough. That's enough to go through 1 year. So let's say fall, spring, and summer. That's enough to go through 1 year of students before you'd have to switch them out again. Better yet, in the LMS systems, you have the ability to create test banks. So let's say you're testing for a concept. So let's say multiplying exponents, okay, something like that. You can have 20 questions on that particular standard or topic, and then the LMS system, you can designate, it would pull 4 out of there or 5 out of there. That way, 2 students sitting right next to each other taking an exam would only have a 1 out of 4 or a 1 out of 5 chance of getting that exact same question. Now, that really is the way to go long term when you're designing tests in learning management systems. It takes longer. You have to write 5 times as many test questions for what you're actually trying to deliver, but ultimately it's the way to go. And you can randomize things. You can have tests shuffled so that even if a student was sitting next to each other, they wouldn't get the same test question. That works as well. I've done that before. You can shuffle answers. You can have test banks. Those are all really good reasons, really good ways to help preserve academic integrity. It just takes time to develop those. But most LMS systems now have some kind of a test bank, and you can actually pick the questions from it, or you can have it draw randomly, which I just like random. If you're in a blended learning environment, if your district or your school is doing blended learning, you can have the students take the unit exams in person and definitely the midterm and the final in person. That way it preserves academic integrity. If your students are scattered across a large geographical range, like the school that I taught at, we had students from all over the state. It was a little harder to do. We couldn't do in-person proctoring for unit tests and midterms and finals. So we had to come up with a plan B, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, the second area that I'd like to talk about is technology. What technology is available to help with academic integrity? So we'll start with low tech and then we'll go to high tech. All right, so let's say that your school is limited in technology. You have a learning management system. The students are doing distance learning. You have no way to purchase a very expensive program to proctor tests online. Okay, so what I used to do is I used to start with the very basic, which is the trusted proctor. So we'd have a form and the students would have to find a teacher, a librarian, a community leader. It could even be a religious official. It could be a scouting leader, a trusted adult in the community that would attest to the fact that they are the students taking the test and they saw them take the test and they didn't receive or give help. So they could take it to a librarian and say, would you proctor my test for me? Yes, they could do it. They would sign off on it, and then we'd have that form in place along with their test. So that's a paper and pencil test, or you could do a computerized test in which they would supervise. That method works in some cases, but it carries a lot of responsibility with it, and it's not always foolproof. So of course the person could just, have a parent sign off on it, or maybe, just the signature is not valid or whatever. There's things that can go wrong in that scenario, but it does have at least one added layer of protection. If you turn to technology to help, there's a few ways to go. You can go with browser lockdown programs. So I've used a browser lockdown program called Respondus, and I'm not recommending any program. I'm just letting you know what's out there. I can't really officially give a recommendation. I'll just tell you what's available. So browser lockdown programs are good, but they're a little bit tricky. They can be nightmares if the technology is not in place. If you're in a computer lab environment, you can have the technology people at your school, the technical team, put what we call a browser lockdown on the computer. So once a student opens the test, all of a sudden the copy and paste features don't work. So Control C and Control V, those features are disabled. The screenshot feature is disabled from their keyboard. So it actually changes the response from the computer. It also will not allow the student to open up to a new web page. So the student is on a test, they want to Google an answer. Guess what? They can't open up a web page. Okay, so everything's locked. It, however, can cause a lot of problems. With so many browsers and so many versions of browsers out there, and then Mac and PC, if you think about all the different combinations, if the browser lockdown program is not compatible with one of those, you're going to have problems. The students will have problems downloading the program. They'll have problems once the tests begin. Sometimes it distorts the images on the test. It messes up the coding on the page, and the student sees jumbled words and jumbled symbols. So if you're going to go with that program, the best thing to do is to do kind of a pilot. Test it on the staff, make sure it's going to work, anticipate the problems. If you're in a lab environment, it's much more controlled, and you can have the tech people make sure that it's working, watch for any problems, and then do the test proctoring. If the students are all working on their own devices, it can be a little bit of a nightmare, especially if some have mobile devices and it's just not cooperating. So it's very, very important that you do test features. And if you're going to go down that road, to front load the information and let the parents and students know exactly what browsers they will need, exactly how this program is going to work, and then implement it. Okay, another program out there is called ProctorU, and it's a webcam proctoring program. So much like you see here, the students would have to sit in front of a webcam and they would have to take the test. There's some positives to that, but there's also some negatives. We have to be very careful when working with minors. You have to have their parents' consent because they are being filmed, and you have to make sure that film is secure. You have to make sure that it's compliant with FERPA. In the university setting, it might work a little better, but with minors, you have to make sure that all the legal issues are taken care of, so there's no problems there. You also have to make sure that the film is archived in a secure location, and that everything as far as privacy is FERPA compliant. Okay, so what the student would do is they would sit just like I'm doing now, and they would take the test and they would type and they would use their mouse, and they're being filmed the entire time. Okay, another technology program out there to help with integrity is called ProctorFree. And a couple things happen there. They have facial recognition software. So the student would do like a preliminary picture or webcam picture, and then after that it would do facial recognition to recognize them, and it would lock down the browser. So it's kind of both things in one. Not perfect again. You can have all kinds of browser problems, and it's very, very important to know what you're getting into before your district spends a lot of money on that or before you implement that, because it can cause more problems than it's worth. Okay, so we have browser lockdowns, we have webcam proctoring, and then we have a couple that are a combination of both. There's another one called Software Secure, which is webcam plus browser lockdown too. And then one with the facial recognition and secure browser. I have not used that one. I've seen the webcam proctoring and the browser lockdowns, and I've had good and bad experiences. Sometimes it's very smooth, everything works fine, the browser lockdowns all work, the students take their tests and it's fine. Now, it doesn't prevent them from having notes. So that's another reason why it may be just better to have the students come in person and take a final exam. Okay, so I think overall things are getting better as far as integrity in the virtual classroom, but what you need to know is what things are put into place from the beginning to ensure that the course meets both the academic rigor and the academic integrity standards. Because the bottom line is we need to get to know our students. We need to get to know who's on the other side of that computer so that we're able to provide authentic learning and authentic assessment in the virtual environment. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and look on the Google page, see if there's any questions here. Okay, so I have another question. Do you have any recommendations for assessing hands-on skills? Massage therapy. Okay, so is it adult class, correct? Adult class. So you could do videos there, and well, you can do videos for teaching it, but you have to be very careful if you're filming. You have to make sure all the legal requirements are met there for people to be put on film if that's the case. You could just have them maybe practice on a dummy or something to show the techniques to make sure you don't get into any issues with filming. And I would consult with your administration to make sure that everything's compliant there. Assessing virtually would be very hard. In that case, I would probably recommend that they go in person at some point, right? Because you have to be careful. You have to be very, very careful with film when you do that. If it's for adults, that's one level, but if it's for minors, then I would say no. And then I wonder, do you have them come in at any point? I wonder if you do blended with learning with them, if they could come in and do like a midterm or a final exam at some point. Interesting. Okay, I'll wait a few more minutes for questions. And go ahead and type them on the course page, Week 2 Performance and Assessment in the Virtual Classroom. Okay, I'll wait a few more minutes for questions because I know there's a delay. All right, any other questions before we sign off? All right, so I will post everything about the peer assessment ahead of time. So look for that in the next announcement. You'll get the rubric and you'll get the instructions for the peer assessment. And then as of next Monday, go ahead and start submitting your evaluations. And then the next week you will be evaluating your peers, and you'll evaluate 3 peers each. Okay, sounds good. All right, have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.